That's right, community, it's AI Friday. This week, we'll embed the most pertinent buckets on AI in the news to help you ingest for inference. Before we get going, don't forget to click like and subscribe. And now, unprompted, AI Friday.
Boy, community, we have a special one going for you this week. How you doing? I'm Aubrey from DevCentral, joined by Joel, Ken, and Byron. And we're here to wow you with our AI amazement for yet another week, where we will be talking to you a little bit about, well, let's just go down the list a little bit. We're going to talk the 2025 top AI use cases and how that differs from 2024. We are going to do a little bit of news from OpenAI, some pretty interesting stuff that's out there with them. Also, there's a pretty neat use case from PG&E with a nuclear reactor that is going to be employing some AI for safety, if you can believe that.
And nothing could possibly go wrong there.
Yeah, nothing. What could happen? And then we'll be talking about a new method for defeating prompt injection, which is actually really, really neat. Although it leaves me with some questions as we go forth in agentic stuff. And then we're going to be talking about animals. So I'm going to leave that one just blank because that's my favorite one. So,
yeah.
How are you guys doing this week? Pretty good? Wowed by everything AI?
Oh, you bet. Learning new things every single day.
Yep.
Well, the new things seem to be those use cases, right? I mean, some of these really flipped me. But oh, look at that! I did the wrong one again. It's just Joel.
Hey, there we go.
Now, there we are. How people are really using Gen AI in 2025. Ken, you brought this to us, yeah?
Yeah. No, this is an article from Harvard Business Review. They did something last year, and they're following up on it this year. And one of the journalists just said, said, look, how are people actually using Gen AI in 2024? Now they did this for 2025. How are people using Gen AI? What person went through a bunch of just user stories, went through Reddit, did some searching, and came up with here about, I think you're scrolling down, you're about to see the top 10. And they looked at what they were for 2025 and how that changed from when they did this last time in 2024. And I just thought this was interesting insights at many different levels, right? As we all try to prognosticate what's going to happen with Gen AI, where's it going to go? How's it going to evolve, and what are the threats going to be? I guess one of the things that I as a very technical person would not have anticipated is that Hollywood had it right, that therapy and companionship is the number one use case. They break it down in even finer granularity later in this paper, but the number one use case is I need a therapist, and Gen AI is around 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it will be there. And that's really, part of me goes, that's wonderful because people have access. So many people were underserved. This is wonderful. And then it makes me think about all the podcasts we've done, the talks we've done in the past, conversations around how you can have malicious AI that tells people to do really harmful things to themselves.
Oh yeah. Murder bot.
Yeah, there's some things in this top 10 that I think are interesting to note, and kind of is a marker of the growth of this technology. Generating ideas is still in the top 10, but things that people were relying on in the early days, like enhancing search and editing text, those have dropped off the list. While improving code and enhancing creativity and going after healthier living, people are beginning to get a little more, the way I read this is people are getting a little bit more trust in these systems, and they're not using them for basic use cases. They're beginning to get a lot more specific, which is interesting. I'm not surprised to see therapy pop up on the top of the list. I think people are, perfectly happy to not stare at another human being when they're opening their souls to someone who's helping them with their problems. But it does give me a little bit of pause that is the top of the list.
And number 3 is related to that, right? That's the whole self-help section at Barnes & Noble, right?
Organize my life and find my purpose. This is something that you'd normally go to a professional for.
Although, you guys watched on our back sort of chat for this podcast, we ended up talking a little bit about sort of the summaries that now you can get from at least from GPT 4.5, and I think maybe 4.0 as well, to just go back through our back chats, like, hey, give me a summary of myself, right?
Yeah.
And we saw Lori do one. I did one also, and basically it's just taking what it knows about you from what you've given it. To me, I was astounded because not only was it able to pick through our conversations, but it also picked through the actual what do you call them, the text from these podcasts, like the transcripts, right? I fed it all these transcripts and it knows about me through the transcripts too, which so yeah, I kind of see that this could be a good use case for this stuff, finding purpose. But I don't know. I don't know how much of that stuff is spot on and how much is guesswork.
Now, my favorite part of this article by far is the list at the bottom. So they break it down into the top 100 use cases, and boy, is it really telling to see what things are ahead of other things. The one that I love is that preparing my Dungeons and Dragons campaign is ahead of homework.
And
so all you parents out there, you should be aware of that.
And tax advice.
And tax advice. It's ahead of tax advice. That's cool.
Right. Right. The other thing, and everything in this list that's sort of the yellow shade, for those watching, that's the creativity part of the world, and generating ideas, creativity are examples of that. That theme was the second most popular theme, and you can see this being reflected in here. You know, as we've had conversations in the past, and we've each had conversations in our personal lives about the role of AI and creativity, we've often been, well, but creativity is what the human will bring to this collaboration between AI and human. Like, well, are we relying on it for creativity? Does that mean that that's not true? Or does that mean we have to redefine what creativity is? I'll go out there and say, as I thought about this, it seems that creativity is not how you put things together, because we find Gen AI is pretty good at doing mashups and putting things together. It's almost like the human's role is to figure out what I want and to specify it clearly.
Yeah, if you look at the top 10, Ken, there is only one in creativity. There's only one thing in the top 10, and that's fun and nonsense. Everything else is geared around help me personally, personal and professional support, doing a little bit of content or creation, and it's mostly education and technical assistance. Otherwise, so that's pretty telling.
Yeah, and I think to Ken's point, I think it was Lori who said this a couple weeks ago. It's the difference between programming and software engineering. Like, you still have to. We still, at this point in time, I think it's clear that you still need a human for software engineering. But can the AI take on some of the sort of, brass tacks, into the weeds coding? Yes, but then when I review boards with developers, they're like, yes, make sure you review it. Like, nobody, I don't think anybody's just setting it and forgetting it, right?
Yeah. Least surprising of all, dead last, planning workouts.
Joel,
dead last.
I've been really thinking about plugging some of my workout questions into GPT 4.5, but I just haven't done it yet.
You should do that. Maybe bring it up in the list a little bit.
Well, yeah, I'll try and use that. Maybe for the 2026 list, I'll break that a little.
But you remember, guys, when we first, it was one of it was Saxton, technical fellow. I think it was the first actual training I saw, and it blew my mind. He was like, "Look, I can put in a data sheet and I can write an email," and I was like, "Oh no!" But look how writing blog posts is all the way at the bottom.
Yeah.
What was higher on that list? Actually, I forget where it is on the list. Is get me out of a ticket.
Yeah, that's true.
There was a use case of use cases of, I got this, violation ticket or whatever. Can you write an appeal for me? And people have been using it a lot for that, and being successful.
Got an open question about what number 92 is. Breaking the rules. Help me break the rules.
What is 58? I didn't understand 58 either.
Rubber duck debugging. Man. I'd love to see this study in detail. I think these data points
we will have a link, I think, to the more detailed backup paper that has sample prompts for each of these.
Awesome.
Okay. Well, we'll definitely put that out there with the rest of the detailed stuff. But in the meantime, I think we probably ought to move on to some of the exciting OpenAI stuff that we've got, right? and actually I'm going to tee this up a little bit, just a hair, because Byron brought us this beautiful article about how O3 and O4 by OpenAI are actually thinking in terms of images. And we sort of wondered, a colleague of ours, Hunter Smith, was telling us that he really preferred O3 because it's very quick and he doesn't have to ask it multiple times. He doesn't have to kind of clarify what he means by things. And thought, boy, maybe that's part of it. It can think quicker because it's thinking in terms of images rather than just in terms of text. But the intriguing thing that we got out of this, and Byron shared this too, is that they also included a neat document that I was fascinated by, which is break glass in case of Spynet, right? It is their updated preparedness framework. And I'm going to read this for the people that aren't watching. Sharing our updated framework for measuring and protecting against severe harm from frontier AI capabilities. I guess it's good that they're thinking about these things.
Yeah. It's certainly a lot more reassuring against trust us. This stuff is okay. I think they lay out a few things in the preparedness framework that are like categories of things that they focus on and ensure that they track well. So the tracked categories there, and that's a good move. This article is not entirely descriptive, and as I understand it, I think there's a different preparedness framework per model. So a lot of reading that I'm going to have to do to figure all this stuff out.
Yeah, one of the cross references in here is to just how they do it in the real world, right? Like looking at actual threats. And the thing that I love to see, because I've been feeling this way for a long time, the industry is a force multiplier. Like transparency is so huge. Like think about, I think you guys probably saw the article about CVEs and CISA and MITRE. Like we need those types of frameworks to be expanded, or we need to have them for AI. I know there are some already, but that's key, right? Like I've seen a lot of issues where it's just in a forum and they're like fixed, and like you don't even know what the root cause was. Like how are we supposed to learn from this, etc.
I worry about the agency. So a lot of this is monitoring. They do have one of those bullets. It's about the what the OS calls excessive agency. I forget where it was, but they have something in there, clarified capability levels. My concern is that, I guess I've seen too many of the science fiction movies where some non-critical system, like, I don't know, sanitation, gets used to in a dangerous way. We're using humans to sort of decide what is a critical system, and to me that is one of the weakest links in this whole thing. Is how do you decide what is an appropriate amount of agency? And when you have a system that's going to behave in very unpredictable ways, how do you ensure that you haven't given excessive agency?
Yeah. Well, this is, of course, new for OpenAI, and so I'm sure that they're going to refine this over time. I do like the idea of having a document that I can reference that spells out very clearly capability sets in some form that's easily digestible, because at the moment it's not easy to see what is and what isn't a tracked category, and so I like that approach. I actually hope it spreads to other models outside of OpenAI. That as a practitioner is a really helpful single sheet way of doing things. But yeah, Ken, you're right. It still is rather arbitrary in nature, and that hopefully they'll refine that over time.
Yeah, hopefully, but it's a good start. Yeah, don't want to downplay that. It's a good start.
Yeah, well, and the other interesting thing, if you get into the weeds, like the scorecards and whatnot, you can't just say that every time they release a new model, it's more safe and secure than the one before it. It just depends, and they actually run a whole litany of tests on these models, and the results, at least from what I've reviewed, they're not consistent. Like we can't claim like, oh, every model is more secure than the one before. I think it just depends, right? We're still in that state.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
Ken, you mentioned excessive agency, and that for me was one of those things that when I go back in time and I look at my my participation in the LLM apps top 10, I look at the things that I talked about early, before we even had a full release of it, before the 1.0, and my biggest question was around agency. It's like, wow, this is a topic that we really need to figure out. How much do we give all of these different pieces of software?
Yeah.
Now, our next article, I thought, really had a lot to do with agency, as Pacific Gas and Electric is going to actually employ AI for safety in a nuclear power plant. Now, the thing that I found fascinating about this was they did the first thing that I think you ought to do, and that's make sure that the system that the AI is on that is doing this kind of stuff is not networked
Yes.
at all.
Okay.
Right.
Sure.
At all. It's
Yep.
unplugged. It's able to actually do the things that it needs to do. It can chew on the thing, the thoughts that you need it to chew on, and it's not going to be able to impact something else to really, end up hurting you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and Ken's point when we talked about this internally, this is not run the power plant, right? This is just help with all the synthesis of the regulatory and compliance stuff that they have to do on a normal basis just to make that faster, right?
Yeah.
And make sure nothing cracks. It seemed like a reasonable. I mean, maybe I'm not paranoid enough. It seemed like a very reasonable use case.
No, I agree. It is a little shocking when you see AI and nuclear power plant in the, but that's not the first time on this podcast we've heard nuclear power plant referenced. Microsoft wants to reopen nuclear power plants to service AI in particular. So this kind of dovetails in with that. Safety systems engineering is a difficult thing to do. And the way that it is done traditionally in power plants is you have like run books that people have and they reference, and you have to chart out and understand failure scenarios manually, and that's hard to do, and it's hard to get right. Having systems like this that can kind of guide you based on what you give it as feedback is it's a positive step for public safety.
This one made me think about a buddy of mine who pretty recently left Palo Alto, and he was there. I mean, pre-IPO, this guy was really, really in it for the next gen security. He was kind of one of the first people I knew that was talking about that type of thing, and just recently left them to go work for an OT security company because he just can't get his mind out of it. Like, oh my gosh, there's so many possibilities and threats out there on those kinds of networks. I mean,
Yeah.
You can't even imagine. I worked for a broadband over power lines company a long time ago, and one of the amazing things that our pole climbers found, because if you're going to be working on poles, you got to have pole climbers. They would occasionally get curious and just kind of plug a terminal into some of the other devices that they saw up there. Admin password. I can't tell you how many of these things were still at defaults. I mean, that you could look and see the label of the manufacturer on the device up there on the pole, and they go, oh, I wonder if I could just get into that. And admin passwords seem to work like 90% of the time because they just don't think someone's going to climb up there with a ladder.
Yeah, it's ironic you mentioned that, Aubrey. Someone in Seattle has actually been going around, and those crosswalk arrows that you punch, and it gives you an audio signal for crossing. Yeah. Someone's been going around and has discovered that those things have a default password, and they've been replacing it with the voice of Jeff, the deep faked voice of Jeff Bezos, welcoming you to the Amazon sponsored crossing.
Or in the AI sense, there were some I think that were deep faked Zuckerberg talking about how AI is here to help you.
Yes.
Musk also. Yeah. They've got those both in Silicon Valley.
Yeah. That's a bit of diversion, but it still strikes at public safety, right? We are not great at defending and keeping the public safe through the use of the systems that we've deployed. Power plants infamously often have monitoring systems that have default passwords, and those have been compromised in the past. So I think it's a good measure in this article that they are not networking these systems in any way. The temptation's going to be there, though. That's the problem with these systems.
So here's the thing. I mean, this goes back to the excessive agency and how difficult it is to constrain that. You can say, okay, great, it's not networked, but networking is not the only. If I were a malicious AI, I I have a vector which is just to mislead the human, right? I could say, this is what's going on with the safety protocols. Here is the remedial step you need to take. And I can still affect change without being networked. So,
yeah, and I wonder, and the article doesn't have a whole lot of detail, and I'm sure that at some point detail will emerge. But these systems do they have access to runtime statistics about how the plan is operating? Because that would make its output more direct. If it does, then it's got to be networked in some form. Maybe not networked publicly, but at least attached to some of the monitoring systems within the plant.
Yeah.
I'm
still being a little more, perhaps devious or indirect here, in that, let's say it's not networked in any way, right? You feed it reports. It's still, if you're relying on it to, and you don't have enough of the safeguards on how you react to what it's telling you, it can still direct you to do something dangerous.
Yeah. Interesting experiment. I hope it works well for the plant itself.
Same. I can't wait to hear more about how this thing goes. It's the first one.
Yeah, coincidentally, I saw like a little piece on Chernobyl. You guys know what that is, and apparently, what happened there was they had intentionally deactivated some of the safety systems and then run an experiment, and that was all human driven. So, like, the bar for what not to do has already been established, right?
Yeah,
yes,
clearly.
Yes, we could have like different categories: AI or stupid human, but not calling anyone stupid. Sorry. We're gonna get back into our. I mentioned animals, right? We're gonna before we get into the real animals, I think we should talk a little bit about CaMeL.
A camel, yeah.
Another one of those kind of LLM apps, top 10 bits. So CaMeL, Joel, why don't you talk?
Yeah, so this is based on, and this is based around a blog post that Sam Willison put up. Sam is popularly thought of as the coiner of the term prompt injection. So he's one of the people I keep tabs on because he always has some interesting insights. Simon proposed a dual LLM model for fixing the problem of prompt injection, but it had some difficulties because prompt injection right now is best defended against by having an LLM try to give you some sort of read on the context that a prompt has, and it attempts to determine a potentially malicious prompt. Some researchers from Google DeepMind took a look at this problem set and realized that two LLMs will work together if you think of a transaction as being comprised of data and a control transaction. So a data transaction and a control transaction. And then you assign one LLM that has access to tools as the privileged LLM, and the other one is the quarantine LLM, which has absolutely no access to tools. And instead of communicating with each other in plain text language, you take that query, the prompt that the user gives you, and you decompose it into code. And the code that they have is roughly structured around like a Python syntax. And then you send and process the data in it in one LLM, and it feeds and talks code back to the other LLM. So it's kind of a way of taking an unstructured query or an unstructured prompt and providing some structure to it. Now, on the flip side of that, because you have structure provided to it, you can actually put policies around the calls that the interpreter makes. So you can say, is this a recognized user? If so, you can allow this particular call. Does this contain something that is PII? If so, do not pass it. And the structure is kind of providing a bit of a policy control and a bit of an air gap between the systems that process the query for the data and the systems that actually run the tools. So what was fascinating to me about this particular paper is that they not only Agent Dojo is one of the tools that people use to assess prompt injection and agentic AI, and it passes with high scores, the Agent Dojo stuff, but it also scores really high in retaining utility. And that's important because a lot of these systems that use an LLM to try to figure out whether there's a prompt being injected, a prompt injection attempt, they don't necessarily get the context right 100% of the time. So sometimes you'll type in something, it's not in a prompt injection attempt, but it will be viewed by the system as such. This one actually decomposes it and it retains the high degree of utility, which means more of your non-prompt injection prompts actually get through and are processed by the system. So really interesting way of retaining utility and increasing the effectiveness of prompt injection protection. So I don't know where this feature set is gonna go. It's a really interesting approach. It seems to me like it might be a good thing to drive into open standards.
Yeah, I like the idea of separation of concerns. Like the front end, the quarantine LLM, right, is responsible for trying to take something very unstructured. It still has an important role to play. It's to take the unstructured thing, turn it into something structured.
Right.
But then your security has to happen. If you want to have explainable security and higher quality security, you want that structured format. A little bit reminds me of a pattern in the real world of going through we're going through a house remodel right now, and there's some structural elements. So you can work with somebody who's more of an interior designer who can say, okay, this is how the flow will work, and really takes a very unstructured set of requirements and we try to map that into something structured, like a set of very structured of the word's overloaded here, but structural diagrams for the house. And then you hand that off to a structural engineer who goes off and actually, now that everything is very formalized, the lengths and the spans of the beams and the thickness and the materials, can say yes, no, this is dangerous, not dangerous. And having those separation of concerns is, we're following that pattern. Seems like a good idea.
Yeah. Now, having said this, the paper does point out some weaknesses in the approach, which is that your tool systems that the agentic AI is going to use, they have to be built around or patterned around fairly well understood APIs. If they're not, then it gets lost. But again, a lot of the systems for agentic AI are requiring patterned APIs. So this thing isn't going to necessarily work with like OpenAI Operator or something like that. But for something a little bit more traditional, like a LangChain approach, it will work for that. But yeah, a novel approach, really interesting approach.
Yeah, a couple things like towards the end that I think are really cool. It says there's a neat privacy bonus just because of the separation of roles and responsibilities, and the quarantine LLM and the P LLM, as it's called. They don't need to know everything, right? So there's that sort of a way to separate perhaps with like exfiltration type stuff. And then the best part is it doesn't use more AI. That's like in the conclusion. It's more like fundamental sort of security architecture type stuff.
Yeah.
This article did leave me with one question. Of course, I have this obsession with with DeepSeek just because it's a very different sort of model from an architectural perspective than we're used to. And Joel, I got the word we were looking for. It's not thick, dense models, right? They only thick models. That's right. They only tested dense models that I saw with this. So it makes me wonder how, with a mixture of experts, you're going to kind of come up with the same kind of benefit. I mean, I can figure out how I would try to wrap that in. Like you'd have to have kind of every one of the experts would need to understand CaMeL and be ready to pass off to that intermediary, tools and then pass back. But
yeah, I agree. It's unclear to me. Clearly the paper was generated around the use of things like Claude, and Gemini, which makes no surprise given the team that generated it. I didn't assess anything in DeepSeek. It didn't assess anything in Ollama. So more research is going to have to be done clearly to see if this approach works for everything. But it's got some promise.
It does, and the last thing that we've actually got up here also has quite a bit of promise. And that is Dolphin Gemma. And no, we are not kidding with this one. Google actually did put out a new large language model this week based on Gemma. That is, and I think it was this week, but I know the article came out this week for sure. But it's basically trained with the largest library of dolphin sounds that we have on the world, is what I thought I read in the article. Yeah. And the object is to then be able to communicate with dolphins in a meaningful way.
Yeah, I rank this high on blogs I never thought I would see on Google.
Right.
Yeah, they want to help understand how dolphins communicate with each other by creating a large language model consisting of dolphin sounds. And yeah, some of the pictures in the article are really fascinating. They collect all this sound data, all the whistles and pops and squawks and buzzes and things like that. They collect it using kind of waterproof smartphones. And the idea is to enable a system. And if you're on the video here, you see this person is wearing a two-way interaction mechanism that allows you to communicate with dolphins. I don't think that this is actual reality. I think this is just a concept that they've come up with. I didn't think that you would eventually be able to talk to dolphins using what looks like half of a Nintendo Power Glove, but that's kind of cool. But yeah, the more I thought about this, it's like, the ability to produce and transform language. Language can be an expression of lots of different things, and dolphin language is certainly possibly achievable by this technology. And so it's pretty cool. I do wonder what dolphins are saying about us, though.
I got to say that I found this really interesting, exciting, and a little bit maybe even optimistic. Other than I also learned that there was a National Dolphin Day, which I didn't even know about before.
No.
That was the 14th, right?
Yeah. But what was unsaid in this article, and there may be a deeper paper that goes into this, is how do they tokenize what Dolphin said? Did they have to come up with their own set of audio features? Did they use audio tokenizer from humans? Because that tells you something about how similar different dolphins are. And then I think in a previous podcast, we talked about how that researchers, as they sort of apply what they called the neurobiology microscope to large language models, they found that they were mostly language agnostic, that once you get deeper into the neural net, you have representations of concepts, of abstractions. It would be fascinating to know if you did actually build something like this for dolphins, whether they have the same abstractions or not, whether it's complete. What was unsaid here is just the presumption of, we took what we did for humans and we just applied to dolphins, and look, this is great. It's like, did that really work? Or is it just a concept? And what we're going to learn about the differences is going to be just as enlightening as what we learn about the similarities.
Yeah.
You have to think they understand the concepts. I mean, there are enough, dolphin tales, if you will, about a dolphin that, spots somebody who's drowning out in the ocean, and they can see that because, well, they can actually see right into their lungs and understand that they're filled with water. And they know that lungs should not be filled with water as mammals, which I think is astounding.
Dolphin tales. I see what you did there.
Yeah, you see that?
Good. Yeah, I do. I'm super curious. When we are able to actually understand some of these styles of communication, what do dolphins say about us? Man, you are the weirdest looking seal I've ever seen, is my bet. Of course, I also started thinking about what if we could apply this to other animals.
Yeah.
I know where
you're going to go, but before you go there, dogs, right? I was going to say dogs may think very differently than us. They're social, so I guess they'll get that part of it. But right, as any dog owner will know, that their world is very olfactory, that it's so much driven by what they smell. And so how they perceive the world and how they think about. I mean, if we weren't visual, we would think about the world very differently. I think if our sense of smell was our primary sense, we'd probably think about the world very differently.
A large synth model.
Or one day we'll finally know what cats actually think, right? How nefarious are they, Joel?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, you don't really need an LLM to understand what a cat is thinking. It's thinking about murder. Any cat owner knows this.
It's true.
Now, what we're going to need these for in the future is to determine exactly who the cat wants to murder. Is it me or someone else?
I remember seeing a funny documentary about the social aspects of dogs versus cats, and you're 100% right. They talked about where you see this glaringly is in nurturing young, right? And you see this with dolphins too. Dolphins are pretty similar to dogs actually in the way that they nurture their young, or humans. They're very they try and help, and they try and assist them to do certain things or nudge them in the right direction to do stuff. Whereas cats instead will take the kittens, and if it's standing too close to the edge of the stairs, the cat response is to push it off the edge of the stairs so that it falls. Like, instead of help it and warn it, it's more of
Tough
a
love.
okay.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
that's
teach you.
cats are how I know the Earth is not flat, because if it were, they would have pushed all stuff on the planet off by now.
Just bat it off the edge.
Absolutely.
I got to tell you a D&D story about a tabaxi someday.
Okay.
Speaking of that, but that's going to have to live for another day, because I
Yeah.
think we are coming up on our time.
Yeah.
Unless anyone has closing thoughts they want
Well,
to add.
I have one closing thought. One of the important parts about understanding dolphin communication is determining when they are going to say to us, "So long and thanks for all the fish." If you've read any Douglas Adams, you understand the reference.
Yes, that is correct, and I think we'll say that right now. So,
Yeah.
Thanks, community. Appreciate the time as always. We enjoy bringing it to you every single week, so we're going to keep doing this for as long as we can. Don't forget to click like and subscribe. That helps us understand when we're doing a good job, and also let us know if you want to see something different. Comments on the video are always welcomed. So long, and thanks for all the fish. See ya.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
We hope you liked this instantiation of AI Friday. We'll be instantiated again next week, same time, same place, and hope to again infer with you. Before we depart, promptly subscribe for all our content and click like to let us know you enjoyed AI Friday.